I'm loving this moment, writing down our joys and concerns. Even if you don't write something down, we've always got some wonderful contemplative music to listen to and share with God. Thank you, Jan. Would you please pray with me? So often we find ourselves stuck, God, stuck in systems that perpetuate injustice, stuck in situations we would wish to change, stuck in perspectives that define our actions. Transforming God, move us to new perspectives in body, mind, and spirit this day. Bless the reading of your word, that it might guide our change. Amen. Zacchaeus. Another retelling of the story you just heard so well by Kurt. The more Jesus traveled and taught and healed, the more and more well-known he became. When he came into towns and villages, large crowds would gather to see him. Sometimes there was much pushing and shoving to get in the front. All wanted Jesus to notice them, talk to them, touch them. Often it was the most respected and influential people in the town who got to meet Jesus personally, and they would invite him to their large homes for fancy meals. If Jesus came to your home, it was a great honor. One day, Jesus was coming to Jericho, and a large crowd gathered along the street. All the best houses had been cleaned and had meals prepared in case Jesus and his friends would dine with them, and everyone was very excited. There was a man in Jericho named Zacchaeus, a tax collector. He had heard so many things about Jesus, and something inside him told him he simply had to try to get a glimpse of him as he came into town. Zacchaeus was not very tall, so try as he might, he simply couldn't see anything in the crowd. He tried to ask taller people to let him in front of them, but because he was a tax collector, nearly everyone in the city disliked him very much. After several elbows to the face, he gave up. He saw a tree standing by the road and decided it would be better than nothing, so he slipped off his sandals and climbed as high as he dared until he could finally see the road and saw Jesus approaching. Zacchaeus held his breath as Jesus walked by him down below. He was so glad he had come. It was true that what they said about Jesus, there was just something special about him. Then Jesus stopped and stood still for a moment. Zacchaeus leaned down on a branch to hear what Jesus was going to say. But instead of addressing the crowd, Jesus looked up, straight into the eyes of Zacchaeus. Poor Zacchaeus nearly fell out of the tree. As Jesus looked into his eyes, a million thoughts went through his head. He felt shame for all the bad things he had done, but he also felt love, like the love his mother had shown him, like the joy he felt as a boy playing with his childhood best friend, that kind of love. Then Jesus spoke. "Zacchaeus," he shouted up, "I would like to have dinner at your house tonight, if I may." Zacchaeus was too stunned to speak, so he just nodded. "Well, come on down here and walk with me then," said Jesus. Zacchaeus scrambled down the tree and did just that. He was so happy he didn't notice everyone in the crowd grumbling about how Jesus had chosen to go to the house of someone like Zacchaeus instead of going to their homes. As they walked, Zacchaeus' heart was heavy. As they neared his home, he looked up at Jesus and said, "Look, half of all that I own, I will give to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone, I will pay them back 4 times over." Jesus was quiet for a moment. Then he put his arm around Zacchaeus and said, "You are a beloved son of God, Zacchaeus. I am proud to know you. And they went inside. And they went inside. Hospitality changes our perspectives in our lives. It's true throughout the Bible. Abraham and Sarah, they were hospitable to 3 strangers. And it was through this meeting that they discovered there was something better. There was something amazing that they were about to do and needed to do. Elijah shows hospitality to the widow at Zarephath and changes her perspective from dreadful to hopeful. Hospitality changes our perspective. Deeper relationships changes our perspectives. Jesus' love was transgressive. Now, so often we hear that term transgression and we think that's always a bad thing, and many times it is. But in this particular case, Jesus was transgressing on a boundary that had been set up by tribalism in his community. His community was shunning this tax collector, and I'm sure there are some very good reasons for that. He was probably very dishonorable in so many ways, and yet, because of that tribalism, it was hurting them more than it was hurting Zacchaeus, although it was hurting Zacchaeus a great deal. This tribalism was that boundary was what Jesus was transgressing. He was pushing through that boundary that was preventing people from seeing some other side, some other marvelous aspect of Zacchaeus that was always in there. Tribal perspectives prevent us from opening our heart, mind, body, and soul to the spiritual horizon and our unification with God. Now, I do not want to give you the impression that tribalism is always wrong. It is not always wrong. We have to have a sense of tribe, don't we? I know the first time that I actually felt a sense of communion and tribe in my life was when I was finally playing football in junior high. Up until that time, I was just the fat kid, right? Bullied in my neighborhood and things like that. And then I found my tribe, where I got to hit a lot of people. It was fun. But it was legal hitting, right? But we formed a community, and it was safer, and I felt like I was one of them. Later on in my life, I found another tribe, because I didn't really want to keep hitting people all the time, and frankly, I was a very bad football player. I tried really hard, but I wasn't that good. So I got to college. And I went there thinking I didn't know what I was going to be. And I got into theater on a dare. And I realized, I like these people. They're crazy. They're wild, but they have very open minds. They're willing to discover all kinds of new things. And that became my new tribe. Later on in my life, going to seminary. That became a new tribe. So I don't want to give the impression that tribalism in and of itself is a bad thing. It is when we take tribalism too far and it prevents us from seeing the love in the other person. One of the things that I think is a great idea, and it's done by a church that not everybody appreciates, but it's Autumn Ridge. Okay, I'm going to say something good, because what they're doing is they are teaching English to Somali families, to the adults in the family. They are transgressing a boundary. They are reaching out in hospitality, and they are showing love to their neighbor, to people that, there's been a lot of bad press about Somalis. But they're going ahead and doing that. This is something that I know we want to do too. We have to figure out ways to transgress certain boundaries that are keeping us down, and they do. But first, we have to face what it is. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." We live in a world that is becoming more and more divided, more and more tribal. The rich and the poor, the fact that wages really haven't gone up much at all since the 70s. Job numbers don't show that so many of the jobs that are out there are part-time jobs. We live in a pretty well-to-do island, people. We're doing pretty well in Rochester. But you start moving out into other areas of this state and this country, and it's not pretty. It is a very hard life. And our younger generations, oh my goodness gracious, the meme that is out there right now, I don't blame them. They look at me and I'll say something that I think is really important, and they'll look at me and say, "Okay, boomer." Okay? That's the new meme, by the way. It's the old whatever, remember that one? Or talk to the hand, I'm not listening to you. Okay? That's what okay boomer is today. It's all over the internet. As soon as you finally give somebody your wisdom, they throw up okay boomer, oh well. But there's a reason for that cynicism. It's because this new generation, Generation Z, is recognizing the fact that there's a very grave possibility that they are not going to have as high a life, they're not going to have as good a life financially and in other ways than the previous generations have had. The hope that we have all felt, certainly the baby boomer generation felt, because it's going to keep getting better. The new generations are not necessarily seeing that. They're seeing all the other things in the world that are happening. The most dangerous creation of any society is the man who has nothing to lose. James Baldwin again. We have been in and are living in a society where we are creating a lot of people that have nothing to lose. If you wonder why tribalism is on the rise, it is because that is what is happening in our societies. And somehow we have to figure out how to transgress those boundaries again, because it's the old saw. If you want to control people, you divide them. Divide and conquer. You want to force them into tribes through fear. Through fear. And as they say, the opposite of fear is love. That is what Jesus was showing time and time and time again. He did it with Zacchaeus, and he did it with many others. He reconciled. Now, this was a transgressive alliance. This high-ranking government official, Zacchaeus was very wealthy, and this itinerant preacher going from town to town. Today, we have some other interesting transgressive alliances. One that I'll point out, back in May, very left-wing, Ocasio-Cortez, I'll just say AOC, you'll know who I'm talking about, put something in a text. She said, "If you are a member of Congress and leave, you shouldn't be allowed to turn right around and leverage your service for a lobbyist check." She wrote this in a tweet. At minimum, there should be a long wait. And who should pick that up but Senator Ted Cruz? Okay? Far right. And he said, you know what? I agree with AOC. It is possible for people that are on opposite ends of the spectrum to work together. And they're working together on some other projects, believe it or not. Now, he's in the Senate and she's in the House. But as you know, it has to go through an entire House and an entire Senate vote, and they have to work both sides of the street. But it is very possible in our world to get things done when people transgress boundaries with love. Ellen got slammed several weeks ago when she was laughing in the football game with George W. Bush. And she said, "Come on, people, just be kind. You can be kind." Yeah, I'm all about that. All about that. It signifies that there is a disease in our country and in our world, and we must change. We must push through like Jesus pushed through hospitality. Today, we are celebrating all saints, those who have given life to their bests, just like Zacchaeus, those who have experienced the presence of Christ in their lives and made the decision to follow him. This was and is the unifying factor in all of our lives in this sanctuary. This primacy of Christ's love, binding together followers of Jesus Christ for the purpose of making God's will paramount in our life. What is God's will? Love. There is no room for tribalism when we are in Christ. Would you please pray with me? God of all the earth, we know that there are no barriers, no walls, no barbed wire that can keep you from seeking to unite us all in one universal community, one holy family. Your dream for us all is to be your people and sisters and brothers to each other. May it be so. Amen.